Hello and welcome to Fantasy Football by Ben. Today I'll be talking about my running backs going into the season. I'll be talking about my 16 through 30 running backs today. At number 16, I have Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs last year was a really solid running back, but in the offseason they kind of made it clear that they don't want him to be the full-time back. And that was by picking up Kenyan Drake. And so I do think that Josh Jacobs will be a really solid fantasy running back, but he won't be as good as he was last year, and that's why I had him ranked 16 going into this season. At number 17, I have DeAndre Swift. DeAndre Swift really wasn't the starter until after their bye week, I would say, in week 5. And pretty much after that point, DeAndre Swift is a really solid running back in fantasy, and I do think it's going to hurt that they got rid of Matthew Stafford for Jared Goff, but I don't know how much it's going to impact DeAndre Swift specifically. I think he's going to be still a solid running back, and he's a good running back in general. And so I do think he could have a really good fantasy season. But they did lose their starting quarterback and the guy who does like to throw little dump down passes to DeAndre Swift, and they lost their head coach. And so I don't know what DeAndre Swift will be like in fantasy this next season. At number 18, I have a guy that was really hyped up going into the season last year and ended up being probably a top 5 running back drafted, maybe top 10, if people undervalued him a little bit. But that is Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Clyde Edwards-Helaire was overhyped last year going into the season. Nobody really knew anything about him for fantasy terms. I mean, other than the fact that he's in the Chiefs offense. And so for right now, I think that having Clyde Edwards-Helaire at 18 is a fair spot to put him. He's still in the Chiefs offense, so he's going to get a lot of work. But they did lose both their tackles, and I mean Patrick Mahomes is still there, obviously, so that automatically makes him a great player. And I do think that Clyde Edwards-Helaire will have a better season than he had last year. But Clyde Edwards-Helaire last year was a top 15 running back, but wasn't a top 10 running back where he was drafted in most fantasy leagues last year. At number 19, I have a guy that's been actually really solid the last couple of years. I just think he's being underappreciated for the team that he's on, and that's Chris Carson. Chris Carson last year was a really solid running back, and when they were talking about the let Russ cook thing, I mean, Chris Carson was still a top 12 back in the league in fantasy terms, and so I do think Chris Carson will have a little bit of a dip this year because they're going to want to make Russell Wilson happy. I think Russell Wilson likes throwing the ball a lot more than just running the ball. And so I do think that's going to hurt Chris Carson a little bit, but I still think he's a really solid running back. And if they get in the red zone, most of the time they like to hand the ball off. And I think that Chris Carson's the perfect back for that. And also he had a lot of receiving touchdowns last year, and Russell Wilson threw a lot of passes to him. So I do think if Chris Carson stays healthy the whole season, he could still be a top 15 back potentially next year. Number 20, I have Kareem Hunt. Kareem Hunt is a really solid running back, and he's playing behind Nick Chubb, who is also a really solid running back. And they're a two-headed monster. And last year, Kareem Hunt played really well with Nick Chubb, and Nick Chubb played really well with Kareem Hunt. And I don't think they would do as well if they were alone because they both like to hit the defense hard, and then whichever one is close to the goal line basically runs in for a touchdown most of the time. And so Kareem Hunt had a really good year last year, and Nick Chubb had a really good year last year. But Kareem Hunt, what separates him is he's a really good receiving back, and Nick Chubb is not as good, but I think Nick Chubb's a better running back. So they balance each other out really well, and I think going forward that I still think that Kareem Hunt's a top 20 back in fantasy football terms, and I think that if he's a running back 2 in fantasy, that's really solid. And a running back 3 or flex, I think that's even better for you. At number 21, I still have David Montgomery. Pretty much every year he's been in the league, I have him around 21 and in my own personal rankings. And so they didn't really do anything to the offensive line. They didn't really get a great quarterback to take some pressure off of David Montgomery. I don't know how much he's going to throw to David Montgomery. And so I'm kind of interested to see what this Bears offense is going to be like. I wonder if it's just going to be the Allen Robinson show again like it was last year and the year before, or if David Montgomery is going to make a bigger impact this season. Because he had a really good end of the season last year, but he played against the 5 easiest rushing defenses in the NFL. And so you kind of expected him to have really good rest of season stuff. But I think David Montgomery, if you look at it, I think he's got really good tools. He's going to be a good running back in the NFL, but as of right now, I just don't know what that Bears offense is going to be like, so I had him ranked 21st. At number 22, I have Melvin Gordon from the Denver Broncos. So what's interesting is the Denver Broncos didn't re-sign Phillip Lindsay, and partially was because I think he got a better offer from Houston, so he signed there. And so I think this could be a really, really big season for Melvin Gordon. And so I have him ranked 22nd right now, but I'm kind of interested to see if they are planning on bringing in a running back or not. And if they don't, then this could be a really good season for Melvin Gordon. And if they do, then Melvin Gordon might lose his job to another running back. I don't know what he's gonna end up doing, and that's why I have him ranked 22nd right now, is because I don't know. And it's gonna be the same thing with a couple of these guys down further in the list, and so I don't really know what their role on their offense is gonna be if they draft a running back, the team that they are on. Number 23, I have Raheem Mostert. Raheem Mostert was really good last year until he got hurt, and it kind of felt like he kept on getting hurt. And so if he stays healthy, I think Raheem Mostert's definitely a top 20 back in the NFL. And he's got the speed for it, and he's got a really good offensive line, and he's in a really good offense that works around running. And so I do think that if Raheem Mostert stays healthy, he's going to have a really good season next year. But the thing is, if he stays healthy. The problem with Raheem Mostert isn't on the field stuff, it's injuries. I mean, I guess that is on the field, but it really depends on injuries, and he's been prone to injuries the last 2 years. And so I do think that really hurts his fantasy value. But if he's healthy, and hopefully he does stay healthy, knock on wood, and hopefully he stays healthy the whole season, and he's a top 20 back in fantasy next year. So do you remember when I was talking about Melvin Gordon and I said that I don't know if they're going to draft guys to replace him or take a starting role from him during the season? Well, the guy I have at 24 is also kind of in the same boat. I don't really know if they're going to draft somebody or if this guy's going to be the main guy for the rest of the season or for their season, what they're planning on, and that's Damian Harris. Damian Harris had a really good season last year. He also came in the year he was hurt, and so he wasn't starting right away, but he ended up the season really well. And so I do think they're going to keep him as their lead back, but I don't know what Bill Belichick's thinking for his offense or Josh McDaniels. And so I'm kind of curious to see if they're planning on drafting a running back in the second round potentially, or maybe trading up and drafting somebody in the first. And so I'm interested to see what Bill Belichick will do with their offense. And if they draft like a running back, I do think that Damian Harris will not be the starter for most of the season then. At number 25 right now, I have David Johnson. David Johnson was really solid last year. I mean, he was a good running back. I think that he was really good for the Texans, and I think that he's a solid running back in general. But they did get Phillip Lindsay, and Phillip Lindsay has been really good the last couple of years. And so I do think that David Johnson's role for that team could be limited if Phillip Lindsay's outplaying him. And so that would greatly hurt his fantasy value. And so I think that David Johnson could be a little bit lower, honestly. But as of right now, I have David Johnson at 25. And I think it's pretty safe to keep him there. At number 26, I have Chase Edmonds. Chase Edmonds, I mean, they got rid of Kenyan Drake. So I do think that they're probably going to end up drafting a running back in the draft this year. I don't know what round draft pick they're thinking about, or if they're planning on having Chase Edmonds start and hopefully developing a running back. But I think Chase Edmonds, if he's the starter the whole year, I don't think he's going to be as valuable as he was last year when he was on limited snaps, because teams weren't as worried about Chase Edmonds as they were about Kenyan Drake. And so I do think that Chase Edmonds' value will be hurt a little bit more, but his volume will go up a lot, and so I do think that will help him in fantasy. But I don't know about efficiency-wise, if he'll be like an efficiency guy that you want on your fantasy team the whole season, because he was getting 8 touches last year and getting like 70 yards a game or whatever it was. It was close to that, like 65 yards a game on 8 touches. And I mean, if he's getting 12 touches or 15 touches next year, with like 90 yards total. I think that brings still some fantasy value, but I don't know if it's like value where it's like you would take him over David Johnson or someone like that, where I would not personally take him over David Johnson drafting, but I do think Chase Edmonds, if he gets the role and they don't draft another running back, I think that Chase Edmonds could have a really good season. And I trust Chase Edmonds a lot, and I think that he's a pretty solid back this season. At number 27, I have Ronald Jones. I don't know how I feel about Ronald Jones. I don't know how I feel about Leonard Fournette. I think that offense is going to be really good, but I don't know which one of them will be the starter. And so I have Ronald Jones at 27, and I don't know if I can trust that, but last year Ronald Jones had a lot of big games, and so that made me think that they trust Ronald Jones. But they signed Leonard Fournette to a big deal, so I do think that also makes me think that they want Leonard Fournette. And so I don't know which one will be a better fantasy back. And so right now I'm going with Ronald Jones. But if they announce that Leonard Fournette is the starter at some point this offseason, then obviously I think I'm going to pick Leonard Fournette over Ronald Jones just because he's the starter. But right now I have Ronald Jones at 27 ahead of Leonard Fournette, who I don't even have ranked in my top 30 yet. At number 28, I have Kenyan Drake. Kenyan Drake just got traded to the Raiders the last couple weeks, and I mean, he's been pretty solid the last couple years. He hasn't been great in fantasy terms, but he was definitely like a workhorse back, and so I do think it's interesting that he's going to a team that already has a workhorse back, and so I think that hurts his value, but also at the same time, I do think it might actually help him because getting less touches means that he's less efficient, or he has less opportunity to be less efficient, so maybe he'll be more efficient than he was in his career. But Josh Jacobs is pretty much the workhorse back there, and I'm kind of interested to see how John Gruden is planning on doing this with his offense this year. At number 29, I have Myles Gaskin. I do think that Myles Gaskin is a really solid running back, but they have so many weapons in that Miami offense that I just don't know what they're going to do. I'm not sure who they're going to draft at 6 either. And so I'm kind of curious honestly, I don't even know what they're planning on doing with that pick. Maybe they're going to trade back and try to get another first-round pick, or maybe they're going to draft Kyle Pitts, or maybe they're going to draft Jamar Chase. I don't know what they're going to do. Maybe they're going to draft Devontae Smith or Jalen Waddle. And so I'm kind of interested to see what they're going to do with that pick, but until then, I'm not sure. And so I think that Myles Gaskin could be getting replaced soon. And they have a really solid backup running back behind Myles Gaskin with Malcolm Brown. And so that was a really great signing. And I mean, Myles Gaskin, though, played, I think it was 11 games last year, and he had like 50 catches. So he's a really good receiving back, and maybe Tua will look for him more. But I don't know how well he will do running the ball. He averaged almost 4 yards a carry last year. It was pretty close to that. So I'm not sure how good of a running back he will be this season if he's limited touch-wise. At number 30 this week, as of right now, I have Zack Moss. Zack Moss is pretty interesting because he got hurt last year, and he's playing with one of the best quarterbacks in the red zone rushing alone. And so if Josh Allen is like that again, then I think that hurts Zack Moss. But outside of that, Devin Singletary is never in during the game when they're inside the 10-yard line, and Zack Moss will be almost every time. And I think that Zack Moss will be a really good fantasy running back this year coming. And so right now I have him at 30, but he could move up or could move down depending on what I think they're thinking. And so obviously, I don't know. I'm not their coach, Sean McDermott, so I don't know exactly what they're doing, but that's just my personal opinion, that I just think that Zack Moss will be in when they're inside the 10-yard line. And it's been proven, like the last year, Devin Singletary was never in on when they got inside the 10, and Zack Moss, when he was healthy, always was. And so I do think that even if Josh Allen's rushing for 6 touchdowns this year instead of 10 like he had last year, I do think that or 8 like he had last year, I do think that Zack Moss maybe could get 10 touchdowns rushing this season. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, be sure to hit that thumbs up button, subscribe for new. Don't forget to ring the bell and press all so that you get all my notifications on YouTube whenever I post. I hope you have a great day. See you in the video tomorrow. Peace.